So, Ken, we're live now to talk about Jazz at Bulls. We're going to get a link in a second to start broadcasting this out to our various channels of people who actually care about watching the Jazz lose to the Bulls on the road. So right now, not anybody has the link, but right now, just kind of chatting about your initial thoughts about the game that we'll probably say again in about 15 seconds.
Of course, my first option or opportunity to do this with you, I get the first lots of the season. So hopefully nobody blames it on me.
Well, I just sent it to Mr. Dan Clayton. I'm tweeting it out to my social channels now, and maybe you'll give a retweet if you don't want to be embarrassed about being on screen with me.
No, not at all.
Live now to talk about our the Utah Jazz disappointing road loss to Chicago at Salt City Hoops Live. There we go. We'll tweet that out. Tweet it out to a couple NBA groups I'm in. Live now. And finally, the Discord. Get it out to some folks on the Discord that we're at. So obviously, Ken, we can get started talking about the game. I think the number one thing to start with is no Mike Conley, and even in Mike Conley's first year with the Jazz, we saw very early on that even with Mike Conley's shooting struggles or some of his bad performances, it seemed like even as Conley was figuring out Quinn Snyder and his new teammates, things seemed a little bit more stable when Mike Conley Jr. was in the game. And obviously that rocketed up last year. His assists went up, his scoring went up. He really figured it out. And today was the first game without Mike Conley, and things just felt disjointed again. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think he definitely has an impact on the team that goes beyond, like you mentioned, his shooting struggles, or clearly when he's shooting great, he's got a huge impact on the team. But even when he's struggling shooting, he definitely runs the offense like a point guard does. And we don't always see that. We often see that from Donovan or from Joe Ingles. We don't always. If you got to put your money on who's going to run a team like a point guard, take Mike Conley first for sure.
Yeah, and Jared Butler seems to be like the number one person that you'd say like, oh, he's going to fill like the backup point guard role, maybe a little bit better than Trent Forrest. Not exactly a great rookie showing from Jared Butler today. We've seen in preseason how kind of electric scorer he can be, and he's got some good passing chops. So we've seen a lot what he can do at Butler. A lot of tunnel vision today from Butler led to some bad scoring attempts, bad shot attempts. Not great passing vision, some turnovers. He did have one assist today. Maybe he had two. I think it was just the one assist. And did not prove to be like that reliable backup point guard option. And look, he's a rookie, but if he's going to fill that role, he needs to do it capably. And tonight, that was not going to be the case.
Yeah. Tonight, honestly, up until now, what we've seen is the game seems to probably still be moving a little fast for him. He's not able to, make the quick reaction. He stops and thinks about things. The only thing he kind of does quickly is if he just puts his head down and tries to create something for himself. Also, I felt like tonight, different from some of the other nights, the Bulls looked awfully big for him. Lonzo Ball's a big guard, and some of the others were a little big for him. He looked a little bit tiny out there. Seems to probably still be moving a little fast for him.
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting our live stream up. All right, so I think we got all our various social channels up. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. If anyone's out listening there, making sure the audio and the video quality is great. I got the chat box up and ready to listen if anyone's chatting away and wants to chat Jazz Bulls with us. Again, I'm Mark Pereira. Got Ken Clayton here with me, longtime Salt City Hoops contributor. I am but a nascent Salt City Hoops contributor, and most of it is done via drunken tweets when I'm very upset about the Utah Jazz about very inane things. To that end, Ken, don't know if you're drinking beer tonight. It's totally okay. It's Saturday night. I'm in Denver. Got got myself a good old something brewery crowler. This is a minimum how much beer we're drinking tonight. I got my beer that I'm drinking in the bottom right hand corner. So Jazz at Bulls again. Jazz. Look, I don't know if there's no Miami Dolphins equivalent. There's no undefeated team that's cracking open the champagne after the Jazz are no longer the league's last undefeated team. Road loss against a very good team, but as we've said about the Jazz, including their playoff losses and all that sort of thing, it's not in the abstract that they lost, which on paper looks like they probably should have. It's how they lost. And there were a lot of turnovers. Obviously, no Mike Conley contributes to a lot of that, a lot of disjointedness. I will say that the two superior talent players, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, who are the two best players on either team, with respect to Zach LaVine, respect to DeMar DeRozan, respect to Nikola Vucevic, the two best players are Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. They gave Utah the lead at the first half, but the mistakes were compounding that we saw in the first half. They were not corrected, and ultimately Chicago just kind of took advantage of that. I did post the stats on the right-hand side here. One main culprit is going to be Jordan Clarkson. We're going to kind of poke at. We'll talk about some other folks here for a second. I'm not even totally mad at Jordan Clarkson tonight because there were a lot of bunnies and easy shots that he missed. But there were obviously also the Jordan Clarkson experience moments, especially on the defensive end, that just didn't keep this thing close. And I'm also realizing that the bottom of the screen says the Jazz win, lose, Bulls 108-108, and that is clearly not what happened. So that we'll fix that one for the next stream, but for now we'll just hide it away. The Jazz lose tonight. I'll fix that later. Anything to say about Jordan Clarkson tonight? What'd you notice, Ken?
There were quite a few, I felt like. So I saw people picking on him on Twitter a little bit, and he always deserves a little bit of that. He's another guy who, puts his head down and goes to the bucket, or just fires up a 25-footer. He had quite a few that were just in and out, and right there, it was like there was saran wrap on the, what do they call it? The hoop. That's what they call it, the hoop. Right. It just felt like some of them were so close. Others were, of course, he's Clarkson. He's going to be out of the offense a little bit, except that I think that is kind of the offense when he's in, at least when his number is called. So he ended up, 5 for 19, 3 for 9 from 3. I mean, the 3 for 9 from 3 is not a terrible night for him. You go 4 for 9, he's 44%, so you couldn't complain about that. So he's only one shot off of that. It's just probably all the little things in the middle, and all the stuff inside the arc where he would have been 2 for 10. That hurts, and I'm sure defensively he probably could have done a little better job. He was right up there on the Hall of Shame with the plus minus at a minus 14 today, and 4 turnovers, which was a big problem for the Jazz overall with 20 in the game. So when you've got Clarkson with 4, Ingles with 4, Donovan with 6, Butler with 2, basically your ball handlers are all kind of throwing the ball all around the gym.
Yeah, and as far as defensive pressure, I mean, Chicago kind of has this weird situation where they have a couple ace defenders and a couple real weak links, right? Vucevic is the opposite of Rudy Gobert. I mean, he's a silky offensive player who doesn't draw fouls and shoots threes and can't defend anything. He's got size and he can rebound well. I mean, his rebounding is what keeps Vucevic on the floor in defensive possessions. At all, instead of in Orlando being replaced by like a Mo Bamba or something like that. But in Chicago, you have Alex Caruso, great defender. Lonzo Ball, he's the like a Rondo light in Rondo's prime, where he takes the gambles, but he's a little bit smart about it. But he's 6'6", he's got the arms, he's got the skill, he's a good defender. And then on the other side, you get Zach LaVine, who every offseason says, I'm going to try harder. And then today, as one example, is not trying hard defensively, or he'll defend one action and lose somebody on the backside. Or everything that Zach LaVine has been a problem defensively just wasn't there today. And of course, we have some other issues with I'm forgetting DeMar DeRozan, of course, who's never been
Yeah.
described as a stout defender. So at times it felt like when Utah was able to go into their base actions, where obviously without Mike Conley, you'd have one of Chicago's premier defenders guarding the ball handler, which was usually Donovan Mitchell. It could be Caruso, who did a pretty fine job today. Or it would be Lonzo Ball against Jordan Clarkson. Like, they had a good mix and match going. Rudy Gobert setting the best screens in the league. If he was able to screen off that great defender and get the ball handler to go downhill, it really started to open things up a little bit. But we saw some passes that were just like a foot or 3 feet off that just weren't great. And I'm not talking about like lobs to Gobert, like a simple pick and roll. Obviously, Chicago was prepared to send somebody to guard Gobert. So whoever the ball handler was, it was their responsibility to get the ball to the open shooters on the side from the help that was coming to Gobert. They just didn't do it. And they were dribbling off their feet occasionally from time to time. That was quite frustrating to watch. Again, it's not that they lost to Chicago on the road in the middle of October, like nobody gives a shit. It's just that how they lost was a really annoying.
Yeah, there was a play. I mean, I can think of several examples of exactly what you're talking about. Twice, Donovan drove down underneath and tried to swing that pass out for the corner three. It's a pass he makes all the time, and he was wide by 4 or 5 feet, like you said.
Yeah, that wraparound pass was totally off.
Yeah, he hit an empty chair, and it looks like he hit it pretty good too. So the pass was there, and that wasn't caused by the Bulls. That was just caused by him not getting the pass where it needed to be. There was another one he threw out for a three at the top, and it went into the back court because it missed its guy by 3 or 4 feet. There was one right at the very end of the game when you and I were getting set up where Jordan Clarkson had the ball, dribbled it off his foot out at the sideline. I think I started to say something, and that's when you revealed to me that you were not live and didn't know what was going on. So I shut my mouth.
Well, it was funny. Like, your reaction was like one of those. I couldn't tell if it was good or bad. Right?
Yeah.
You gave like a clenched kind of thing, and that could have been like a great three, or it could have been Jordan Clarkson dribbling it off of his foot. The Utah Jazz are not a 99 points per game team, right? Like I know it's such a basic thing to look at how many points they scored, but like this is a team that we regularly expect to score in the 110s. So you look at all the issues. Obviously, the 20 turnovers total, right? I don't think it's fair to pick on one guy. You know, when Donovan has 6 turnovers, but he's also a plus 13, like how much of that is forcing it versus he's playing hero. But I think it's those wraparound passes that you're getting to. If he's averaging 3 or 4 turnovers, it's like, yeah, that's Donovan Mitchell scoring 30 points and he's a plus 13. But it's those extra 2 turnovers that are like, that's kind of unnecessary. Going down the list, Joe Ingles, he's not a 4 turnover guy, right? He's a medium usage guy, and when he's making decisions with the ball, he's usually not throwing it all over the gym. He had a couple times where he or maybe just with the one time he got his pocket picked, and that's not going to happen either. So credit to, even if it's not going to be the greatest on ball set defense, Chicago did play active on the ball, and we're a little bit more feisty on that side of thing. The other, and also in 9 minutes, Jared Butler just can't have 2 turnovers, right? Like that's you're as a backup point guard. I kind of this is a terrible high level stat, but I'm like, if you're going to be a backup point guard playing 10 to 12 minutes, you get 1 turnover. That's you get your 3 assists, you get your 1 turnover, and you leave the game. And right now, you know, he had 1 assist, two turnovers, and didn't make a shot. And you said this about Clarkson being minus 14 or 15. Butler was a league or a team low minus 16. That is so hard to do in 9 minutes. And was a total turnstile against Levine and Ball and that sort of thing. Also shooting, 11 of 38 from 3. That's 29%. This is not an 11 for 38 team. We saw a lot of wide open threes missing, and you look at this game and how it happened and how we lost, and you start thinking like, okay, so in the fourth quarter when they're down 12, 13, 14, and it's slipping away, well, what if they were only down 8, right? Just 2 more threes going in. Just 2. Bojan had a wide open 3. Earlier that went down, that just didn't go down, and it's one of those games that you leave the game thinking like, well, if we had 7 games against the Bulls, they're probably going to be okay. But definitely the 11 for 38 was a problem. Didn't see a whole lot of forcing there aside from the Mitchell and Clarkson attempts. Joe Ingles kind of kept us in it early with the shooting. But would also hope that they get up more than 38 attempts as well. They're usually in the 40 plus range. Am I wrong about that, or am I misremembering that?
Their goal is 40 plus basically, and they were a little low tonight, but they also were just so hot and cold. I don't know if you saw my tweets during the game. I think at halftime I tweeted out, first quarter was 1 for 11, second quarter was 5 for 11. So they went on a 9% to 45% swing. 9%, you should be slitting your wrists. 45%, you're gonna, if you can hold that for a whole season, you're gonna win a championship.
For
so
sure.
they come back on in the third quarter and they go 1 for 7, 14%. And then when the game got kind of crazy there and they were trying to come back, they all of a sudden pushed the right button and they were 4 for 9, 44%. So they've got 2 terrible quarters and 2 spectacular quarters. And it was always the case, in my mind anyway, like at the half. If they came out and shot 35 plus the rest of the game, they'd probably win the game. But they didn't. They came out and shot 25-ish in the second half. So and it just wasn't there. Because you're right. If they would have shot 35 in the second half instead of 25, they wouldn't have been down 12. They wouldn't have been down. I think they got down as far as 17 or something. So they wouldn't have been down that far. They wouldn't have had such a hole to climb out of. They might have been able to get over the hump.
Yeah, it's like this fans paradox, right? So you're watching the game, and when the team works to get a great shot, you're like, this has to go in. It's a 100% shot, right? Like the Donovan bunnies that he misses in the lane, the Jordan Clarkson bunnies that he was missing in the lane, the Bojan wide open threes that he wasn't able to hit. You expect those to be 100% shots. On the other hand, when the defense is playing well or the offense isn't playing quite so great, and but the shot goes in, right? You're like, well, that's just because our players are great. It's this weird paradox where sometimes the wide open shit just doesn't go in, and that can really change like how you respond at the end of the game and how you feel about it. Another thing is like Chicago they're 5-1 after this game. They're an unusual team. The DeMar DeRozan signing was widely panned because it just wasn't what Chicago really needed in their team. This is a team that had plans with Lonzo Ball. Obviously, Kobe White's coming off the bench, but he kind of had an up and down year last year. He's still injured. He's a 6-man gunner type, small, not a great defender. And if you have Zach LaVine as an all-star aspirations for 30 points per game, you have Nikola Vucevic as your center, as I described, the inverse of Rudy Gobert, just a spectacular offensive talent. The signing of Alex Caruso says, like, okay, we have at least a point defender for the opponent's best player, and he's legit 6'5", 6'6", kind of lanky guy. Think of him as like a less burly Royce O'Neal, but arguably a better defender at this point. Caruso is fantastic defensively. I think he's averaging like 4 steals a game so far. Adding DeRozan just is a record scratch on both what they were trying to do offensively with Alonzo Ball and Zach LaVine and Vucevic led offense against a defense that really needs a little bit more juice that DeRozan doesn't provide. That said, you come into playing Utah. Utah's issues are going to be mid-range defense, because they're going to sell out against the rim and against the three, and because they have Rudy Gobert and they can kind of play up on the perimeter and force teams coming inside. And the Utah has a lot of balance on the roster as far as size from point guard to center. And Chicago, they have lost Patrick Williams, their second-year player, for the entire year with a dislocated wrist. Up and down on Patrick Williams on his prognostication of how good of a player he is, but he fills that small forward, power forward role for them, and was looking to kind of be a jack of all trades kind of player. And instead, Chicago just came into this with Patrick Williams out. They came into this game saying, well, we're just going to play 4 guards basically, and Vucevic. Sorry, I go back and forth between Vucevic and Vucevic because I've heard it pronounced both ways. But I am still, even though I pronounce it 2 different ways, it's about 4 different 4 fewer pronunciations than Craig Bolerjack provided for his name today. So they rolled out a starting lineup of obviously Levine and Ball,
Yeah.
Vucevic, and the fourth starter being DeRozan, and DeRozan playing power forward. Well, maybe small forward. The fifth starter being Javonte Green, who has played for Boston for quite a while as a deep bench, kind of defense only, non-shooter. He played 22 minutes, and so it was basically 4 guards and Vucevic, and you saw some issues as the substitutes started to come in. This is a whole long diatribe to say. Eventually, Eric Paschall is defending DeMar DeRozan, because DeMar DeRozan is playing the 3 or the 4 for Chicago, and Eric Paschall is exclusively a power forward. Like he would have been a small forward in 1998. Right, so this is the kind of thing. He's just a big. It's like Trevor Booker, and just make him more burly, right? And he's got effort, he's got guile, but he doesn't have guard DeMar DeRozan skill. And DeMar DeRozan ended up scoring a shitload of points, and almost all of them from the mid range or at the basket or getting fouled.
Yeah, I think that was, I guess it lined up that way because of who was on the court. I will mention, you talked about earlier how Jared Butler had the worst plus minus on the team. It was actually Pascal. He was minus 19, although he played almost double the minutes that Butler did. So I guess give him
my apologies to Jared Butler and his
longer.
family. He did not have the worst plus minus on the team.
But plus minus per minute, he still did. Pascal, he had a nice outing the other night with what was it, late in the game when nobody could stop. Help me out here. Was it Will Barton in Denver?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Pascal has had some good moments guarding the perimeter
Yeah.
this year for sure. Like it's definitely like if he gets stuck on a switch or something like that, you're not sitting there being like, well, we're completely fucked. Like you're sitting there like, all right, he's gonna try, and those couple of years in Golden State, I think has trained his brain appropriately as opposed to starting in like Sacramento under Luke Walton or something. But it's still, his body type and his skill.
Yeah, so he definitely, whoever he might match up again later in the season, this matchup tonight was certainly not in his favor because DeMar DeRozan just kept going. And to be fair, DeMar DeRozan probably got rolling against somebody else. And once you get a rhythm, it's a little easier to keep it on. DeRozan was, 13 out of 22? So he wasn't crazy hot, but he was certainly about 50%, and he hurt the Jazz with 32 points.
I thought it was really key that Chicago, and I need to tune into more Chicago games. Clearly, as like I said, they're 5-1. There's only so much basketball to watch, and when you have a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old, things can get difficult on the entire watching 30 NBA teams. But I thought what was key is that they initiated actions almost all the time with Levine or Caruso or Ball. DeRozan was never, I know it's just a kind of cliche, but he was never the guy walking it up the court. He was playing the 3, he was playing the 4. He was announced pregame as the forward from USC. And I thought it was key that he was able to get the ball going downhill against Bogdanovich, against Ingles, who started today for Conley. Pascal was more of like, he abused Pascal in those kind of like, walk it back one-on-one and then kind of like figure out how to abuse him. You're totally right. He was able to abuse other guys earlier, but that was kind of like in motion and not quite working Bogdanovich down or working Ingles down. Chicago really made sure to get DeRozan going downhill a little bit. And yeah, he's warmed up. He knows where the basket is now. Right, and then look, Pascal didn't play 38 minutes. To your point, he played 16, 19 minutes, something like that. They were very bad 16 minutes, right? So, and a lot of it was guarding DeRozan. And look, Bull scored 107 points. Maybe 8 of those were scored against Pascal with the DeRozan-Pascal matchup, maybe even only fewer than that. It just seemed notable that they were able to get some good actions off of that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a place where they hurt the Jazz. You said something, and I had a side thought. Now I've completely lost it because that's what happens when.
I'll move on to the most interesting Utah Jazz subtext of the game. It was the first ever meaningful. That's a key asterisk. First ever meaningful Tony Bradley revenge game, and he had an actual revenge game. I felt like he had two completely stonewalls of Hassan Whiteside. The first one was actually admittedly surprising. Hassan, the skill he has over Rudy Gobert, and even the litany of Jazz backup centers we've had over the past 3 years, is he has some like offensive verve. Like, right, he has a spin move, he has a hook shot, he has these things. He caught it on the low block and immediately turned into a hook shot. And Bradley read it. He was like, I know you're going left shoulder. I know exactly where the ball's going to be, and he stuffed him. Three or four plays later, he stuffed him again on admittedly like a slower Hassan reaction or something. And I thought Bradley, who, again, we talk about Chicago and their outlook and everything. Their backup center is Tony Bradley, right? Like, and Utah knows how fruitless that endeavor will probably be, especially if you're like looking. If Chicago needs defense, like they need Tony Bradley over Vucevic, right? But Bradley had I think a pretty solid day. He was Chicago's plus minus team high at plus 19. And I thought he had a pretty wonderful 14 minutes. With Utah's, the way they rotate their centers, like it's, Rudy Gobert has several stints in the game instead of a classic like starter backup. Tony Bradley's minutes came kind of against both, but he had a lot of success against Hassan Whiteside defensively.
Yeah, I think looking at those minutes, so not all of Rudy's minutes, obviously, but the minutes that you usually have in the middle portion of each half, straddling the quarter break, is you've got Rudy, you've got Bogdanovich, Ingles, Clarkson, and then you've got Conley. And so tonight it was missing the Conley factor on the positive, and then unfortunately throwing in the Butler factor in those minutes. So that obviously kills. Oh, I guess Pascal's in there for part of that too. So yeah, it's certainly like messing with the plus or minus. In fact, it's another night tonight where Rudy Gobert's a minus because he's out there in those minutes with Butler, but it hasn't always been Butler. The last few nights, it's also been like even the Conley minutes. Those minutes have been a little negative.
Yeah, the goal with those minutes, as always, is if Gobert is at center, you can always hope to just not be negative. And that's how Utah wins the games, right? Like, okay, if the opponent's starters get the best of Utah starters because they have more talent, whatever, what have you, well, the bench is still going to be not negative, and that's going to keep Utah in every single game.
Yeah.
Ostensibly.
And tonight that was not the case. Basically, that middle lineup, the quarter end lineup, is the one that has all the negatives, and Gobert, Ingles, Pascal, Clarkson, Butler, and Forrest too for the 3 minutes when he did come in. I actually expected to see Forrest come in instead of Butler in the second half after how well the Butler minutes went in the first. But Quinn did give Butler probably about 2 more minutes in the second half, and then he pulled out and went with Forrest for the remaining 3 minutes of that stint before he went back and tried to win the game.
Which I think is key, right? Like, before we shit on Butler too much, I think there's just so much that happens outside of the game context that I think is worth like saying, okay, Quinn trusts certain things. I am like the last person on the Shelvin Mack is okay bandwagon. I understand that, and I don't want to do a deep cut to fucking Shelvin Mack, but there were times where Mack kind of controlled the offense the way Quinn wanted it controlled, and if he's going to trust him, then I think it's worth kind of seeing it out. And we've seen that with other players going to like Rodney Hood and that sort of thing. Donovan Mitchell, when he was a rookie, right? Just jumping him in, saying like, I know what this guy is. With Jared Butler having one of the worst backup point guard halves you're going to see, for him to roll him out there as a rookie and say like, I know what this guy is as my backup point guard. I need to play him more. Even after a struggling first half, it just shows that this isn't going to be a situation where Butler's going to be mothballed because he doesn't get it done, right? Snyder is going to give him probably 41 games to say, can you contribute to this team in the playoffs? Probably even more than that, right? It's only when we get to the crunch time or like seating issues or something like that, where he's going to say, if Butler hasn't figured it out and he's not a net positive, which is very rare for rookies, to say, like, look, I'm going to give the ball to Trent Forrest, who is also probably net negative, or mothball both of them for the playoffs. And I think it means a lot to Jared Butler, and I think it adds something to say that Quinn gave him some minutes in the second half to say, like, are you better than that, or do we need to go work on some things? I thought that was really impressive that Butler has that role in Snyder's rotation.
Yeah, I guess it only surprises me because I also lived through the Dante Exum years where, and I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but it didn't seem like the hook lasted that long. But that's not even a criticism of Quinn Snyder either. It's just a difference between how I view those years and what I saw tonight.
Do you want to have a 5-minute Dante Exum sidebar? Because I will. I'll give my 1-minute version. I think Quinn Snyder to Dante Exum is like a coach with a rookie quarterback that in football, where you're just clamoring for the rookie to play, you're clamoring for this quarterback to play, and meanwhile you're just not seeing in practice the guy just not getting it right. And so finally the rookie quarterback gets a shot. And isn't just making mistakes. You expect rookie quarterbacks to make mistakes, but he's making the same mistakes that like he's being exquisitely coached not to make. And that was that was I think the source of Quinn Snyder's hook was not that like Exum was making mistakes, is that the mistakes he was making were over and over and over again, and if he's not improving on those mistakes, well, now you just have a bad backup point guard, and now Dante Exum's out of the league. So I'm going to trust Snyder on this one. Look, I'm going to trust Snyder until he starts doing like really bad stuff. But for now, Utah should be happy. We got a top 5 coach in the league, and if he's going to trust Jared Butler to go through a minus 16 game, I think we should be really happy with Jared Butler, right? Like if he's going to be that quick with Exum, that means he's giving Butler a little bit more of a leash. Because as we saw, Dennis Lindsey being out, them going a little bit more deep cut, broader here for a second. We heard that he didn't have a great relationship with Dennis Lindsey towards the end. Obviously, the source of that fracture is going to be the coach wants control over the lineup. And if Snyder does indeed have more control over his rotation, I think that means he knows that like Butler's good enough to deserve these minutes over a Trent Forrest. But at the end of the day, Trent Forrest right now is a better player, as evidenced by bringing in Trent Forrest at the end, because Snyder could trust him more to just kind of like stop the bleeding in the third quarter.
Yeah, and he did do a little better. Again, still net negative, still -5 in 3 minutes, but certainly turned the tide a little bit from what we had seen in the other 9 minutes that Butler had played. No, I'm totally with you on the Dante Exum stuff. To go back to that for a second,
let's go back, man. This is a me and you conversation at this point. Yeah. Like, if someone wants to tune in and hear Dante Exum discourse, you come into the right place. This is a Utah Jazz postcast. We're talking about Dante Exum, currently NBA free agent.
Houston cut him free right at the last minute this year. Yeah, so I mean, I totally think that's something that fans just in general, to think of this broader, miss all the time, is that the coaches are seeing everything in practice. It's like the discussion that I never quite buy is what you got to give a guy an opportunity on the floor, you'll never know if he's ready. And the other side of that is you got to get ready and show me you're ready in practice before I'm ever putting you on the floor. And different coaches are going to weigh those things a little bit differently, but I'm sure you're right that the same things we were seeing from Dante on the court once that caused hooks were probably things that Quinn had seen 12 times the day before in practice. So that's how he that's why the hook looked so quick. But no, it is good to see Jared Butler get some reps. Hopefully he's the sort of guy who can take that who can look at the tape, who can take the feedback from the coaching staff, who can understand, I got to get better at this, and this. In your rookie season, you're not going to improve at everything, but you can improve at 2 or 3 things throughout the course of the rookie season and see if you can get yourself to the point where you can help a team out for 5 minutes when needed in the playoffs. That's probably, at least in the playoffs, that's probably pie in the sky for Jared Butler. Is could he play 5 minutes if needed in the playoffs? That's all they really. That's by the time they get to April, May, and June. That's all they're looking for him. If they have to look for him for 25 minutes, then there's a problem. Then it's not going to be April, May, and June. It's going to be April. My opinion. Did I lose you?
Sorry, I was on mute. So let me chat about going into May and June a little bit. So the Utah Jazz rotation, there's going to be somebody injured, right? If they're just questionable for a game or two, it just does not happen that the Jazz are going to be completely healthy coming towards the playoff time. And if considering the Jazz backcourt, right, if we think about who those players are, Mitchell, Conley, Clarkson are going to be your three main guys, and that's a very tight backcourt rotation. And then you add some players who kind of who handle the ball. Obviously, Ingles started for Conley today. Somebody's not going to be available, right? And I'm not wondering if Butler can play 5 minutes just as like a throw him out there and give some different juice. I'm wondering if Game 4 against Dallas in a 2-7 matchup, if it's Game 4, can he play backup point guard for 18 minutes, right? It's like backup point guard and like, pseudo shooting guard kind of thing. Can he be not a horrible negative? That's what I'm hoping his outcome is not can he be a net positive player for the 5 minutes that we might need him in the playoffs. It's that is somebody gets hurt, can he play basketball at a professional level to play with Gobert and Mitchell on the court at the same time, right? Can he be a guy that you can play with like other great players and be like, hey, things are going to be okay, where he doesn't get ruthlessly picked on, like, oh, he's out there, let's immediately put him in the pick and roll and he'll absolutely ruin it, and he'll get torched. That's what I'm hoping for, because it's either that or Trent Forrest gets a lot better shooting the basketball. I want one of those two options to happen because I'm really not sure that we're going to get to like the Western Conference Finals in a great matchup or something and have an advantageous matchup, but all of a sudden we have this gaping hole at guard that we can't solve. Look, I'm picking nits here, but our aspirations are a championship with this roster, and I'm trying to see like, okay, where are the holes going to be and how can Jared Butler fill them, or Trent Forrest?
Yeah, I still probably disagree about that because by the time the playoffs roll around, it's such a tight roster that even if they're missing one of those three guys, one of those three point guards, and I'm including Joe Ingles as a point guard because when needed, that's the role he plays. I think if they're missing one of those three, they still only need the 5 to maybe 10 minutes from a Butler or a Forrest. If they're missing two of those guys, well, then they're screwed anyway. Because if they then they can play Jared Butler all the minutes they want, but it probably isn't going to make a difference as far as the ultimate goal that you mentioned, which is a championship. Because he's probably not going to be that good by April of his rookie season as a second-round pick that he is. He is welcome to prove me wrong. I'm always happy if a Jazz player wants to prove me dead wrong. He can go on social media and mock me if he plays 18 minutes in the playoffs.
Has that happened to you before?
What? No, never has. I don't make that.
Has it happened to Dan before?
Predictions.
I feel like it has. I feel like he's gotten into a spat with like
I think he had something
Deontay
with
Garrett or something.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think he had some minor thing with somebody at some point, and it wasn't a big deal. I mean, in the heat of the moment after a loss, it probably was a big deal to the player for 5 minutes, and then. But this was back, I think, when
it's a big deal to me. Damn it.
Yeah, I think it was back when he was still like covering the team, which he actually is right now as well. He's doing Spanish radio, but on a coverage basis. He's I think just helping him out while somebody else is unavailable.
Right. I don't think I've ever gotten to a spat with a player, which with the amount I tweet voluminously about this dear team and the shit this team gets into, I'm surprised it's not happened yet. But I'm sure that'll be soon to come, because I'm sure every Jazz player is tuning into Salt City Hoops live postgame, and seeing what Mark and Ken have to say about the Utah Jazz after a loss on the road to the Chicago Bulls, 99-107. Again, just trying to get my radio voice going. I don't have as much podcast experience as you can, so I'm figuring out how to do our natural segues here. And yeah, you're right. I said 18 minutes for Jared Butler. That's obviously like 18 minutes too high, right? And I used to be really into making sure Utah had a good backup center. I think I'll bring it back full circle, I promise. But your point about like if Utah's without two of those guys being screwed, right? I want to poke on that for a second.
Okay.
Because I think my bias towards wanting solid backups is unfairly colored by how admirably Derek Favors played in that Clippers series, the Joe Johnson game-winning shot series, where Rudy had a really rough-looking injury and was out for a couple games, and Derek Favors played just barely good enough. Like, he was on like the tail end of good Derek Favors, and he played just good enough to keep Utah in that series, where I'm sitting here thinking like, well, I'm not saying, we're without Conley and Clarkson for the rest of the playoffs. I'm wondering like, well, what if Conley like needs a couple games for his hamstring? What if Clarkson just like he has like a dislocated thumb on his shooting hand? He needs a couple games. That's the type of situation I'm wondering about. Like, can you keep the series afloat? Not the entire season, but can you keep the series afloat? And I think I'm unfairly colored by that Derek Favors keeping that series against the Clippers afloat at the center position.
Yeah, no, and I think you could be right, but I just think if you get my concern is if you get to two guys out, then you're filling two holes, and that's a whole different ask than even filling Rudy Gobert, who would probably be the biggest hole certainly on the defensive end. And I think I shouldn't even qualify that. I think losing Rudy Gobert for one game is the biggest hole you can create. I think they played pretty well without Donovan Mitchell for an extended period last year. It
was without Conley and Mitchell that was the real problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's when you get to two players that effectively play the same position. I mean, Donovan is the backup point guard for all intents and purposes, and Joe Ingles is kind of the third. When Jared Butler goes into play, yeah, he brings the ball up the court, but he often brings it up and throws it over to Joe Ingles and says, "Okay, I'll go stand in the corner now." So,
obviously, the number one thing I think I want to say out of Jared Butler, this has been an extended Jared Butler conversation. But again, if you have championship aspirations, you lose a game on the road to the 5-1 Chicago Bulls. You're looking at kind of how this team can really refine around the edges. And Jared Butler, I think, is make the threes. We know you can. We know you have the form. We know you have a consistent form. If you start making 1 3 a game, yeah, you'll be all right, kid.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we haven't seen him make much of anything yet. He did have just one bucket, I think, in the last game. Yeah, one for, but he's overall. I can't even count this up fast enough. For 1 for 12 from the field. So he's having a rough start. Every time he goes up,
that's a Jordan Clarkson first half.
Yeah, but it took Jared Butler 5 games to get there. Every time he goes up, though, I just see nerves. I mean, his release looks off because even though he said before game 1, "I'm not nervous. I've played lots of basketball games," you can tell he's pulling that string short and he's not getting the shot off clean. And 1 for 12 basically is evidence of that. But you're right, that is a Jordan Clarkson first half on many nights.
And David Locke told Nate Duncan this in Nate Duncan's podcast, and I wrote this like way too many words article about Jordan Clarkson, why I felt like he really was the sixth man of the year. A lot of my argument was about Jordan Clarkson's attitude, his verve, and what he does for the team. And I'm an attorney. I wrote way too many words about it and probably didn't reach a great conclusion. And David Locke, I think, summarized it well, where he said Jordan Clarkson emboldens others that also have a green light. And I hope that attitude permeates to Jared Butler because we know Butler has the skill. And if he also feels like he has that green light, not from Donovan Mitchell, who's a fucking superstar, but from Jordan Clarkson, who's like a very good player, but also fucks up a lot. Like, I think that should help. I think that should help. I really agree with Locke on that attitude should permeate to Butler.
Yeah, absolutely. And if he feels like he has a green light, Quinn can let him know when the lights turn in yellow, and that's his job. And even when the lights turn in red, he's coming out of the game. So
yeah, I mean, if you got some all-star like Mitchell telling you like, "Oh, you got it, kid, you'll be all right," you're like, "Well, yeah, it's easy for you to say, but it's one thing when like Ingles or Clarkson are telling you like, "Hey, you're still good to do this. We're not going to be upset. We've made our money. You should go make your money now, Mr. Second Round pick. We need you to play." I think there's a real attitude to that. And I just love this team, man. I love the personalities on this team. I think there is once we got over the Donovan Rudy spat, I just think like that emboldening attitude from all the players, I think is just so fun to watch even after a loss.
Yeah. I think you just gotta get over the nerves. I think some shots will start falling, and that attitude from others is gonna only help that. And then the rest of it, the game will slow down for him when the game slows down for him. And I think that's the other key for him is just the decision making right there. He's seeing everything in triple speed compared to the other players, and that's normal for a rookie. That's normal for a lot of rookies. I didn't see how, for example, Cade Cunningham played tonight in his rookie debut. But a lot of rookies come in. They need some time to adjust to the speed of the game, to decision making, and more so with the Jazz because there's more decision making, more moving the ball, really almost passing that ball the second you get it than there is with other teams where there's a little more, whether it's ISO heavy or the pass post heavy, and we just don't have that here. We have Quinn Snyder wanting that ball moving around most of the time. Or the next action taking place, even if it's not a pass, even if it's a movement, and he's just not at that speed. But he'll get there. He seems to be. All accounts are. He's a smart player. It's just a question of speed and nerves right now, I think, and hopefully, if I join you in late November or in December sometime, hopefully there's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, for sure, and today was disappointing, but don't sell your Jared Butler stock. Like this is just a game on the road against a good team. Utah has not played great defenses so far, so let's just keep. I mean, even against the Nuggets, right? Like let's give them some time to play around. Speaking of rookies, and including ones drafted around Jared Butler, I always kind of look around like the second round, like who was drafted around Jared Butler, and one name that really stuck out to me as a very surprising pick was Ayo Dosunmu for Chicago. And Ken's nodding his head like, yes, I definitely know that player. No, I'm just kidding. It's interesting that he has played in every game for Chicago thus far. One game was in garbage time against the Pelicans, but he has played in every game with Patrick Williams out. He got 21 minutes, and I think he was a team plus high tonight for Chicago. If I remember right.
Close
to Tony Bradley. How could I have forgotten that one? Defensive presence, I thought he was better than Javonte Green, who is a noted defensive kind of, that's his thing and why he has a contract. Not extremely known as a shooter, came out of Illinois as kind of just like an NBA skilled guard with a lot of like wide variety of things that he might turn into. And he was kind of a problem. He ended up with the ball in his hands a lot on the defensive end today. Any thoughts on him and what problems he provided Utah today? It's okay if the answer is no. I just thought it was like, it was interesting to see 20 minutes from Dosunmu today, and as one of Jared Butler's brethren, as a early second round rookie.
No, it's funny you mentioned that. Of course, I know who he is because before the game, I kept meaning to look up, who was going to be the next most likely guy to fill in some of those Patrick Williams minutes, and I never got around to doing it. I was just doing it during the game when he came in the game the first time, and Craig Bolerjack butchered that name so bad that I didn't even realize.
Here's Bowler's thing. It feels like he looks at his fucking name card like the first time, right? Did you at your college graduation, like, did you like walk across the stage and like hand like the speaker like a pronunciation card of your name?
Well, I didn't walk.
Okay. So at large school graduations, like you hand them not your name, but you hand them a pronunciation guide to your name. And my name is Pereira. It doesn't look like you say the name Pereira, whatever. And she said it beautifully. So Bolerjack, it looks like when he sees one of these new names, these rookies or what have you, he looks at the name and it looks like he's being handed a pronunciation card. And he says it beautifully the first time around. But then he throws the pronunciation card in the trash. And then he has to rely on the entire game to remember how to say this guy's name. And he does not remember.
I think the first time he said it, it did seem like a pronunciation card because he said it so slow and so awkwardly that I didn't even realize who he was talking about.
Desumo.
Well, the first thing he said, and coming into the game now is I-O Desumo. And I think he even kind of messed the last name up. But I was like, I-O? Was that like OG? The guy with Toronto? And I'm like, who is I-O? Because I was envisioning the letter I, the letter O. And only when I looked at the thing, I was like, oh, he means I-O. But he said it so slowly because he probably did have a pronunciation card that I just didn't catch it.
And I'm already kicking myself because... and this is dating myself a bit. Back in high school, I was.
You're safe when you're on the air with me. You're not going to date yourself any older than me, so go for it.
Well, I was going to say date myself, but I'm not really going to say a year. But I guess when I was in high school, I was a PA announcer for a stadium, and I was doing freshman and JV football. And nobody's here, nobody cares. But I used to really make sure I pronounce everybody's names right, because it's like it's your name. Like you deserve to have it pronounced like who you are. Like if somebody's gonna say your name, you deserve to have it pronounced right. And if you're wrong, someone should correct it. And I've already butchered Mr. Desumu's name a few times. So next time we have to, on the next postcast, if we ever say Io Desumu, I will make sure to say his name correctly the next time. But Craig Bolerjack is paid like $18 million a year to do this. So, and I'm being paid in beer from Dan Clayton. So, just kidding. He was a good player. Interesting to see what comes of him this year. Definitely seems like those like better NBA player than his stats might provide. Didn't seem like he was in the wrong place. Didn't foul a ton. I think he only fouled once, right? And he had some pretty tough matchups, guarding the potent Utah offense. He had some... he never got credited with the steal, but he was a reason that the turnovers happened, right? When we think about like all the voluminous turnovers that Utah committed, a lot of time was because Desumo was just mucking up the action, or there was a pass that could have been easily made, but he was there deflecting it away, or he was there kind of like in the middle. So I just kind of appreciated his basketballness today, and it's like the complete inverse of Jared Butler, where like you want Butler to come in and score 6 points, have 2 assists, and 1 turnover. Like I said, the 1 turnover you're allowed. For Desumo, it's like if he posts a 1 rebound and 1 steal and no turnovers and 0 of 1 from 3, you're like, well, he was still a plus 17 today. Kind of the inverse, and I thought it just interesting for what different teams were looking for. Yeah, I know the Jazz need a backup point guard, but like we're still, we signed Rudy Gay. We're looking for that like Royce O'Neal extra player to play defense, but also be able to shoot threes. And interesting to see Desumo get some minutes today, and we'll see. And as I mentioned at the beginning, a defensively challenged Chicago team. To see what kind of role he plays going forward with Patrick Williams out, who is supposed to be a plus defender for them.
Yeah.
Other things happening today. Quinn's birthday was today. am I mistaken where he was debuting the new zip up look? Is that the first time he's not worn a polo this year? I thought it was interesting. He had like this open zip up with the Utah State logo. He was looking like he had just finished 18 holes and was now had to coach a basketball game. And I thought that was an exquisite look in this post-suit NBA coaching responsibility he has.
I actually in retrospect noticed the zip up, but I didn't recognize that it was something new. So I'm not much good for the. I don't think the fashion critique because I don't pay enough attention to him.
Look, Ken, you got to realize once we run out of shit to talk about, I start talking about sartorial aspects of the game.
Yeah, the hair and the insane looks. That's what I noticed with Quinn Snyder.
That's a given. I mean, I with how Jared Butler played today, he probably could have played backup point guard too. So Donovan bumped his knee today. He obviously played the rest of the game and was fine. He got 82 games and it's October. If he's got a bruise on it tomorrow, I would not be surprised to see him now play against the Bucks on a back-to-back. Similarly, you saw Nikola Jokic get hurt against Rudy Gobert a couple days ago. He had a day off and was able to play in his next game. I wouldn't be surprised if Donovan woke up the next morning with a bruise on his knee and everyone said, you know what, you probably shouldn't, especially with Mike Conley expected to play tomorrow. Again, Donovan's he's 26, 27. He's athletic. He's the man. But he doesn't need to be a hero if he wakes up with swelling. So we'll see how he looks in the morning.
Yeah, my expectation would be as long as he's not swelling, he will play. I mean, if there's even with a bruise, would be my guess. He's a hard guy to sit down. I think Conley is a little more open to it because of age and because of some of his I guess just age. His ailments are related more to age. Donovan, he's unless I'm remembering wrong. Yeah, he just turned 25. I think he will go. But unless there's swelling, on a knee. Yeah, he probably gets sat. But I'd be surprised if he did for the most part.
For sure. Rudy Gobert, excellent today. I know we kind of railed on his plus-minus earlier. It was a minus 14, 15, something like that. But I just don't think, when a plus-minus gets over 10, I start to think like, okay, something is an issue here. This is the very rare instance where I think a plus-minus at his level, which was a minus 14. Again, I always click away when I want to look
15.
at minus 15. Thank you. I don't think it tells the story at all. In the fourth quarter, Vucevic was something like 2 of 14 from the field. Yeah, it's 2 of 4. Vucevic was 2 of 14 in the fourth quarter. He obviously finished a little bit better than that. 4 of 19, a whopping 4 of 19 from the field. And Gobert was obviously a huge part of that. Vucevic, notably, all of his offensive skill and his touch and his featheriness and his ability to shoot. And he's only recently learned to shoot threes over the past couple of years. The dude doesn't shoot free throws. He shot 6 of 8 today. 8 free throw attempts is whoppingly high for Vucevic. I think a few of them came when he actually got the ball at the free throw line and was able to drive on a mismatch that he actually got fouled by a Royce O'Neal type, for instance. Gobert played marvelously on Vucevic, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a really big reason why Utah was not down by 20 going into halftime. If Vucevic was able to be at his usual 50+% with a weaker center of Utah, we'd be in a bigger problem. Now the minus 15 was caused by other issues. We talked about DeMar DeRozan earlier and such, but I would not say that the minus 15 of Rudy Gobert tonight was indicative of how well he performed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's been one of the weird things statistically about even the first 4 games. He's been negative a couple of times, and Whiteside has been the plus minus positive, and which is just odd. It's just probably a symptom of
Whiteside a plus 7 today.
Yeah, and it's a symptom of who he's out there with, and that doesn't mean they're bad players. He's out there with Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, Jared Butler tonight, not for all of his minutes, but for those key minutes when they struggled. And
minus 15, minus 14, minus 13, all dragging Rudy down.
Yeah, and then Pascal, who again, he had some great moments in other games. Tonight, he was having issues. Nobody was able to really stop DeRozan. So those minutes have actually been the problem that we thought last year that the Favors minutes and the year before the Bradley minutes were where they need to tighten those minutes up a little more because while Whiteside is not always perfect, the Whiteside minutes have been that positive.
Last year, and I'm going to pose an existential question for you, Ken. Maybe not so much existential, but more about rotation minutes, which is more specific than existential. But I've had a few beers, so I don't know the difference between the two terms. So last year, I thought Quinn was actually pulled a real nifty rabbit out of the hat by staggering Rudy's minutes and placing him as the defensive anchor with an interesting Jordan Clarkson, Mike Conley lineup where it was like, yeah, I don't know who's going to be my 3 and 4, but I know that I'm going to get some scoring and some pick and roll with Conley, Clarkson, and Gobert. We'll see what happens with there. That worked amazingly. I'm wondering if he goes back to more of a standard rotation where it's because Whiteside's playing pretty well. If he's able to say Gobert is, I swear, is the greatest in shape player in the league. I don't think there's a player who is indefatigable as Rudy Gobert, right? Like he's at the end of his shifts, he's always just full of energy. He doesn't lack energy in the screens he sets and the way he plays. I'm wondering if he's afforded more longer stints with Whiteside being as a little bit better than Favors thus far. I also think so that's one point I'd like you to react to. The other point is like I don't like it when I'd like the Jazz to experiment more this year. I've said that a lot. I don't like it when they're just like bringing back the same rotation they had last year with Gobert and just copy pasting it over to a new year. I want them to try new things. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on like both the experimentation factor and also with Whiteside playing okay, if you want to kind of give Whiteside a chance at those pure bench minutes and giving Rudy more time against an opponent's starters.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly possible. My first reaction when you started talking was there's no way it'll happen, and that might still be right. Not because there's a problem with theory, but just because I don't know if we'll see that much experimentation. Because that's been something that's been in place for a year and 5 games now. But it's certainly something that's potentially worth looking at if they continue to think that some Whiteside could benefit from playing the straight up the bench minutes versus the half starter, half bench minutes, or however it's really breaking out. I do know though that they felt like a huge part of their regular season success last year was exactly that rotation. Was the fact that Gobert and Conley were on the floor against second units, and they loved that. So I don't know that they change it, but it's something they could certainly tinker with if they find a space in their schedule where they say, let's just try this out and see what we think for a couple games. I wouldn't complain unless it goes horribly, and then I would flame them on Twitter.
Yeah, and I guess two responses, or maybe 1.5 responses to that. I firmly believe still, and I think Utah believes this as an organization, that the 1 versus 8 matters. There are 7 amazing teams in the West. The 8th team is probably going to be shit. If maybe not horrible, but they're not going to be like the Magic. But they're going to be like definitely an underdog in every series to play against, like Utah versus Memphis, right? Memphis last year, good team, definitely going to lose. So the 1 versus 8 definitely matters. So I hear you on regular season success. Like what will win us 55 games? What will give us the 1 seed? And the half thing is just, I understand Milwaukee was a Kevin Durant toenail from probably not making the Eastern Conference Finals and then playing in the NBA Finals and then winning the whole fucking thing. I understand that it was that close, and it just felt like they had a little bit more battle testing to them by trying new shit during the year. And I'll be talking about this probably every postcast. Is just, what did Utah try today that was preparing for the playoffs? And this is the type of thing I'm talking about as part of like rejiggering the rotation. Not anybody's minutes or who's playing, but okay, so we're playing a team with like Vucevic is their second best player. We're going to match Rudy to Vucevic every single fucking minute Vucevic is on the court. And when Tony Bradley's on the court, yeah, Hassan Whiteside's going to mess with him. Yeah, Tony Bradley got the best of Hassan Whiteside today, but that's more of a post reaction. I'm just saying I would have loved to see Rudy just match up with Vucevic for the entire game and dare Chicago to beat him via anybody else. I don't have a conclusion or a question, but those are like my 1.5 reactions to your reaction.
Yeah. No, I think in my mind, I think, or I should say, in his mind, I think he already has an answer. So if he is going to do something else, he's going to want to do it somewhat conservatively. Find a space where he can do it in a game that, whatever. If we've got the Magic. I mean, obviously we have the Magic down the road. Oh yeah, in fact, next week. So that's sort of time when he might try something different. But I think coaches are. Most coaches are fairly conservative. They're going to try out things when they have to because of the injury and whatever. And to be fair, they tried out the expanded minutes for Butler today. If you want to say that's an experiment, it is a little bit. In fact, that's a question I have for you. I don't know how much longer you're planning to stick around.
Man, I'm here to chat as long as I got beer in the cup, man.
The idea, I saw somebody discussing this on Twitter, and I've thought about this too, is you're going into this two-game, this back-to-back series, and you know you're going to sit Mike Conley in one of the two games. So just the philosophy is always interesting to me about, do you sit him in the game that you think you have the better chance to win? So you're putting all your cards on the game that you have a greater likelihood to win, which I might have said was today. Or do you do the opposite and say, we want our best chance to win the hardest game? And so you take him out of the game, maybe you had a better chance to win, that hurts you, and it probably increases the likelihood you come away 0-2. And obviously we don't know yet that that's what's going to happen. We know 0-1 is where we're at right now. So what do you think about that whole philosophy?
So I'm going to just throw a wrecking ball to your entire premise. I think the issue is that Drew Holiday and Brook Lopez are also out tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. So sorry for the wrecking ball. But with those two players being out, especially with Rudy Gobert, they started Giannis at center the other night. So I mean that'll pose its own interesting question with Rudy guarding Giannis, as he usually does, but we'll see as things move. That makes the teams relatively equal. You probably give the edge to the Bucks because Giannis is amazing, but in this situation, Conley probably can tear up the Bucks backcourt with Mitchell a little bit better than he might have would tonight with, the Lonzo matchup or the Caruso matchup. I do believe Lopez and Drew are out tomorrow still for at least one more game. So I think that probably, because we didn't hear about Conley being out until pretty late, if I recall. Not today, but it was kind of late yesterday, early this morning.
Yeah, I think it was sometime yesterday they announced that he was out of the list. He was out. Yeah, you're right. As of tonight, because it is also a back-to-back for the Bucks, who played in San Antonio tonight, and I should have put their flight out there. I'll have to do that after we get off.
Yes, I forgot to mention that at the beginning about your esteemed role.
Yes, my stalker tendencies to track the Jazz across the country. So they did not. Neither of those two played tonight, and the Milwaukee Bucks suffered a loss at the hand of the now 2-4 Spurs. So definitely not playing at their peak. Probably if I'm sorry. Who?
No, they lost tonight to the Spurs.
Yeah, they did, but it was in Milwaukee, I guess.
So no
they're
flying.
Not traveling. They're not traveling. It is a back-to-back, but it's a no travel back-to-back for them.
It's no traveling, but they did start and play 18 minutes of Thanasis Antetokounmpo. So I'm not sure exactly how full strength they'll be. Look, man, all our kids are going to be trick-or-treating tomorrow. I hope folks tune into the second half of Jazz Bucks tomorrow when all their kids are definitely like high on candy corn and Snickers bars, hopefully full size in your neighborhood. That we're winning over. Look, Middleton and Giannis are good enough to, and we were talking about Mitchell and Gobert are always going to be good enough to have you in the game. Middleton, Antetokounmpo, and Giannis. I need to clarify which Antetokounmpo I mean. Apparently, are good enough to keep you in the game. But the rest of Milwaukee's roster is really lackluster. Grayson Allen is arguably their fourth best player at this point. It's a real struggle for Milwaukee right now.
You could make an argument he's third. I'd probably put it ahead of George Hill at this stage. But either way,
the fact that we're making an argument for Grayson Allen as your third best player is a little indicative.
One more hour of this podcast. George Hill versus Grayson Allen. Go.
Yeah, definitely the decision we need to make. So this was great. Obviously, disappointing, and I'm sure we have a ton of viewers who are just keen to watch two idiots talk about Jazz Bulls after a loss on a Saturday night on Halloween weekend. I'm sure if you're under the age of 28, you have like 98 better things to do. But at the end of the day, Ken, I love talking about the Utah Jazz with you.
Hey, the feeling is mutual. It was a good time, and we'll have to do it again as you do. What are you doing? A couple times a month? You're going to do these?
Yeah, we're going to start a couple times a month.
Just in general, you're going to do them a couple times a month, and then you rotate people in and out. I'm not trying to take the full-time job.
No, and I can't wait to have a rotating group of co-hosts. Thank you, Isaac, for doing the first one early on. I think we're just trying to get our wheels under us, figure out how this works. I'm figuring out the technology. I'm editing text in like real time. I started. It's funny that like the default text that I had to start this was Utah win lose Bulls 108 right, because I was like, it's gonna be one of those, like we're probably gonna score in the hundreds, and the Jazz didn't even get to 100. We're figuring out the technical stuff, we're figuring out like schedule and that sort of thing. I mentioned having a baby and a 2-year-old, so it's kind of like, all right, so when are the good nights? So we're probably not going to do this for like East Coast games that start at 5 Eastern, where like the post game starts at 7:30 or something like that, because those are the games I'm usually watching at like 11 p.m. as I watch it on like DVR. But for anyone watching the tail end of this or on recording, I love doing these. Too often, I'm watching a game, I'm on my phone, Ken, and I'm just drinking beers and tweeting, and the game ends, and win or lose, like, I still want to talk Jazz. I want to talk about them. And nobody's around. Everyone's like, the game's over. I'm like, well, what if we had a spot for 10 people to tune in, right? And just chat Jazz. So at the start, this is going to be very podcast-like. Like, all right, so, we don't have a rundown, like a podcast rundown or anything because the game just ended. But we got some stats. We got some stuff that happened. We both just watched the game. We can chat about it, and then people start filtering, and we start chatting about it. So if this ends up just being like a me and somebody else for the rest of the year, I'm thrilled for that. Like, whatever. I just want someone to talk about the Jazz with, and if I can force somebody else to do it with me, then I'm thrilled. If I talk about it to myself, that's cool too.
Long as you don't answer back.
Well, friends, thank you for joining us. Ken, thank you for joining me. And Ken, great to meet you and talk to you. And we'll do this again soon. I got nothing else except I can't wait to get a win tomorrow on Halloween.
Yep. That's the hope.
All right. Good night, Ken. Good night, everybody.
Night.